Look out.
When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. And I stop and I turn and I go for a ride. And I get to the bottom and I see you again.
Today we will be revisiting the Devil's Tree, and we'll see if we get anything to happen like it happened before. So let's go. Located in an undeveloped field deep in the heart of Martinsville, New Jersey, is a lone oak tree. To the unknowing passerby in modern times, it is merely a large tree that has seen better days. But to those who know, it is the location of one of the most cursed sites in the state. The dark origins of the Devil's Tree can be traced back to colonial times. At that time, the tree possessed a long, sturdy branch which jutted out from the lower part of the trunk and ran parallel to the ground. Unfortunately, when the locals discovered this, they found an evil use for it. They would bring slaves that they deemed unruly to the tree and hang them from the limb. This would set a horrible pattern into motion for years to come. As time moved on and slavery would be abolished, the Ku Klux Klan would form and set up a central headquarters in Bernards Township. They would hold their meetings in the secluded hills surrounding the area, away from the prying eyes of the public and the authorities. One location in particular that they favored was the Devil's Tree, which had served as a natural gallows of sorts since the times of slavery. They would continue the sick tradition and lynch locally abducted African Americans from the same limb used for their relatives just a generation prior. They had believed their disgusting actions here would not only show their resolve and their horrid belief, but would also send a message to the other African Americans and drive them out of the area. Luckily, this wouldn't entirely work. As the years passed, Martinsville would become more developed. Neighborhoods and farms would be built in close proximity to the Devil's Tree, and it became harder for the Klan to commit their murders in seclusion, and thus the hangings decreased. The bloodlust of the tree would not end here. Aside from the stray lynching here and there that a few of the bolder Klansmen would still execute, it is said that a farmer who owned one of the farms that was built near the Devil's Tree would add to its dark legacy. For motives that are not clear to anyone but himself, one night, in a fit of rage, the farmer brutally murdered his wife and children before heading to the tree and hanging himself from the branch where so many others had perished before. Decades of evil left its mark on the tree, figuratively and literally. It would seem that the tree called to troubled souls. From time to time, a suicide victim would be found hanging from the lynching branch. With the surrounding area now being dotted with nice neighborhoods, locals began to resent the tree and the wicked reputation it was giving their town. They had decided enough was enough and the tree had to go. This, however, would prove to be difficult. Every time somebody would step up for the task of felling the tree, something would go awry. Axes and saws would break, and workers in the process of trying would suffer strange illnesses or injuries that would prevent them from continuing. It was practically a guarantee that if you tried to take down the Devil's Tree, it would take you down first. Eventually, the idea of cutting the tree down was abandoned, as it seemed to have supernatural forces protecting it from harm. Word would spread about this cursed tree that survived so many attempts at removal. Curiosity seekers began to come visit the tree to see for themselves if the reputation was true. They would learn that there was much more to it than what they had heard. When drawing near, particularly in the dead of winter, an unnatural warmth would be noticed surrounding the tree. So much so that even snow would not stay on the ground near it, and it would melt in that spot, even if the rest of the field was frozen. A legend would grow from this. It was believed that due to the high number of violent deaths that had occurred on the lynching branch, an evil energy now permeated from the tree, creating the heat. Some say the heat comes from a portal to hell which opened in the spot and gave the evil arbor its moniker, the Devil's Tree. The heat anomaly, however, would be far from the only unexplainable thing that would occur with the tree. Visitors would report hearing all kinds of strange sounds coming from the trunk. The sounds would range from horrified screamings to the sounds of children laughing and playing. But perhaps even more disturbing would be the things people would see. On certain nights, it was not uncommon to see bodies hanging from the branch, slowly swaying in the breeze, only to have them vanish as they were approached. The tree would also continue its ways of protecting itself in a few horrific ways. Many would report that when attempting to test the legends, they would be intercepted and chased from the area by an old black Ford pickup truck. The truck would often appear out of nowhere, tailgating the frightened thrill seekers until they were far from the tree. Then, it would just vanish. The headlights would go out, and nothing would be in pursuit anymore. Some speculate that this truck belongs to KKK members trying to chase the curious away from their former territory. Others believe it to be a sentinel spirit from hell that guards the tree. Whatever it is behind the appearance of this guardian truck, as terrifying as it may be, it is far less of a danger and far less experienced than the other way the evil oak guards itself. It would seem that whatever the force is behind all of the phenomena surrounding the Devil's Tree has become more defensive as the years have passed. True to its nature, just as it had when people would try to cut it down, anyone who touches or disrespects the tree is made to pay dearly. The ways in which it attacks vary in severity, possibly in correlation with how badly the perpetrator offended the tree. The most common curse dished out tends to be car trouble and/or bad luck, usually happening when leaving the area or sometime soon after. Sometimes the punishment is much more harsh. Stories have emerged of people's gas pedals inexplicably flooring it as they've driven away, causing them to go crashing into the woods. Others think that they've disproven the legends when they've left and arrived home without incident, only to find themselves falling extremely ill not long after, or suffering from a long series of misfortunes, sometimes leading to death. Naturally, with all the folklore surrounding the location, people have come from far and wide to test their mettle against the legends. At one point, it was a full-time job for local authorities to keep the late-night visitors away from the area. As is usually the case, many of them would be unruly and do reckless or annoying things that would constantly bother the locals. But in a very rare and surprising move, rather than try to continue to keep people away from the cursed grounds, the state instead opted to turn the field the tree sits in into a park and actually protect the tree. A chain-link fence was even wrapped around its trunk in an effort to shield it from any more damage. Just prior to this, there had been more attempts at removing the tree. The infamous lynching branch, as well as the branch next to it, were successfully cut off at some point in the early 2010s and are no longer there. Despite this, the Devil Tree continues to sit menacingly upon its hilltop in its unsuspecting surroundings, quietly awaiting the next fool to test their luck. So there it is. As the stories would have you believe, this is actually in like a faraway remote location. This one actually is not. This tree is actually, I guess, technically considered to be inside of a park. But if you look at the surrounding area, we actually have a neighborhood right off to the side there, and actually a pretty busy road off to the right. But despite this, there are all these stories of treacherous nights of people being chased out by these black trucks and all of these horrible, unfortunate incidents that happen when one messes with this tree. And as I'll explain toward the end of the video, I think there might be a little bit something to that, but here it is. It is the Devil's Tree. As you can see, the trunk that used to be used as a gallows of sort has long since been cut off. And as we get close to this thing, you can see the trunk has taken a lot of abuse over the years from people trying to take it down. But just a very weird place, as goes with the folklore attached to it. And actually, as you can see, somebody has tried to cleanse it and burn some sage and placed it on the trunk. You'll actually find all kinds of various things out here when you come to it, be them religious in nature from one end of the spectrum or the other. Sometimes you have people leaving Christian artifacts in an attempt to try to dispel the alleged evil. And in others, you'll have satanic artifacts. But there you have it in the backdrop. Devil's Tree. As I said, and I'll explain in a moment here, I've had quite a history with this thing, which is why you don't see me testing out the legend right now. So what I'll go ahead and do is try to walk you through my experience that I had back in 2015, and you'll understand exactly why I am not touching this thing anymore. I made my first journey to the Devil's Tree in December of 2015. I had initially read about the legends surrounding this location in the Weird New Jersey book many years prior, and after having taken a long sabbatical from legend tripping at the time, I was eager to finally see it and test it out for myself. I arrived around mid-afternoon and was surprised at how easy it was to locate. It stood out up on that hill, towering conspicuously over everything else around it. I parked on the same side of the road as the tree and sat there for a moment waiting to see if the black pickup truck said to guard the area would appear. But after a few uneventful moments, it did not. Thinking to myself, strike one for the myth, I left the car and started up the hill. Having only seen the tree in books, I was surprised to see the infamous lynching branch had been successfully cut off. Still, the tree had a foreboding presence about it. As I drew near, I could see a chain-link fence going from the ground to about 7 feet up, completely encircling the heavily scarred trunk. It was apparent that the legends of people trying to take down the tree with no success had undoubtedly been true. Numerous old gouges from axes covered the lower part of the tree. I stood there for a moment, taking it in and taking photos of the local legend before me. I knew what I had to do. Being the person I am, I had to test the legend and see what would happen if I touched the tree. I put my phone back in my pocket and approached it closer. Despite being a somewhat overcast December afternoon, a slight warmth did seem to come over me at that moment as I got within arm's reach of the tree. Though actually touching it would prove to be somewhat difficult thanks to the chain link barrier. Here goes nothing, I thought as I took a small vertical leap to give myself just enough clearance over the fence to essentially high-five the trunk of the tree. I then took a few steps back, looking to the upper branches. All right, let's see what you got, I said incredulously as I stood back and waited for a retaliation. But once again, just like when I waited for the black pickup truck to appear, all I was met with was a resounding silence. I gave it a moment, eyes still fixed on the tree. I guess it is all just an urban legend, I thought to myself as I began to turn around and start back towards my car. Or perhaps it will wait until I leave, I continued to ponder. But as I headed down the hill and the road came into view, it was apparent I would not have to wait very long to see what the tree had cooked up for me. There on the shoulder of the road, maybe 30 feet from my car, stood a pit bull. It was motionless, with its gaze locked on me. It was not the picture of a vicious dog, though, that you may be imagining. It was a chocolate brown color, and it did not look like it was stray or anything like that. But still, there was something very off about it. It did not move a muscle as it stood there staring me down with the most piercing yellow eyes I had ever seen on a dog. Not entirely sure what I should do next. I just knew that I was safer inside of my car than I was out here in the open with the strange dog that had just appeared before me. I slowly took a step forward, being careful not to make any sudden movements, keeping my eyes locked on the dog. As I did, I could see the hair raise on its shoulders, a telltale sign of a building aggression in a dog. It, too, slowly took one step forward, all the while keeping its head in the same position. I maintained a slow pace, moving in the direction of my car, and as I did, the dog did the same in my direction. We both continued this until I had reached the front of my car on the passenger side, and the dog at my trunk. Now that we were closer, I could hear the low rumbling of a growl bellowing out of this creature before me. At this point, I knew I had to do something risky, and it was either going to cost me or save me. I was going to make a break for it. I broke away from the hypnotic yellow gaze of the dog and made a mad dash around the front of my car. I dove inside and barely slammed the door shut in time just before seeing the front paws of the dog bounce off of my window. It had charged once I went for the door, and after it hit the window, it just stood back and locked eyes with me again. I turned the car on and began to turn it around to leave, and as I did so, the dog continued to keep pace with me, not blinking or once breaking the unsettling glare. I paused for a moment and snapped this picture of the dog before getting out of the area. As I was taking its picture, it began its slow approach again, and with that, I drove off. But this is perhaps the creepiest part of the whole experience. As I headed up the road, not even 5 seconds after I passed the dog, I looked in my rearview mirror to see if it was following. And it was not. In fact, there was nothing there at all. I was still close enough that even if it had ran in a different direction, I would have been able to still see it. But it had just vanished. I got the message I was being sent loud and clear and left the area. I learned my lesson that day. I have visited and still do come visit the Devil's Tree from time to time, but I will never touch it again. Sometimes, even without touching it, the bad luck residue will follow you. A week to the day after shooting this video, I had an accident and blew out 2 of the tires on my car, and the same night, I developed a nasty illness that took quite a while to shake off. Explore this location at your own risk.